Thank you. We ask for your attention now as we begin our final session. Hasn't it been a wonderful experience? I have found this to be an extraordinary occasion. I have enjoyed the presentations. I feel I have learned so much from them. My name is Gary Doxey. I am an Associate Director of the International Center for Law and Religion Studies here at Brigham Young University. My particular area is Latin America. I work in Latin America quite a lot. But the whole global experience has just been extraordinary. And we want to close the session beginning with some thank yous. First, we want to thank our student volunteers, so many of them. Especially, we would like to thank the Executive Committee of Students who have worked tirelessly who have been with us, who have traveled here to help us. We ask all the students who have been involved, please to stand and be recognized. They may not be in this room, but please stand and be recognized if you are. They're mostly working, I understand, so they're not in the room with us. Secondly, we'd like to thank the interpreters. There are about 50 of them, if you can believe it, 50 interpreters who have been interpreting 12 different languages. They've given generously of their time and talent under the leadership of their coordinator, Aaron Eggleston. Would we show some appreciation for them? They can hear us. They're not here with us, but they can hear us. The production and technical team we need to thank, including Jonathan Hart, Michael Williams, Russell Jensen, and Ron Ralston and his student team, Blythe Shoup and her student communication team, and others too numerous to mention. The organizing committee, chaired by Professor Elizabeth Clark. She has been assisted by Sherry Rogdy, Janet Nelson, Jeff Nelson, and many others, with very special thanks to Deborah Wright, Lori Anderson, and other colleagues who have arranged travel, accommodation, meals, and logistics. We want to thank the incredible staff, professors, and the dean of the law school who have facilitated this event and made it possible to have it take place in the law school. There are many members of the hosting committee, including members of our International Advisory Council. Perhaps you've met a few of them. I want to explain a little bit about that. The International Advisory Council, they are, in some ways, you could call them a donor group. As you may be familiar, in the United States, higher education runs off of generous voluntary donations to a large extent. And the members of the International Advisory Council are the generous donors who have their generous means, but also of themselves. We'd like to have them stand and be recognized. There are many, many more of them in room 306 in the overflow. They wanted to make sure you all got seats in this main room. But maybe after we're finished, you would congratulate them and thank them. Finally, we want to thank all of you for coming. The sacrifices you've made to be here, the wisdom that you have shared, your knowledge, the many miles of travel. And I'm sure at this point, the sleep deprivation has become a factor. And we thank you for letting us rob you of some of your sleep so that you could be here with us. Thank you. I have a very special item I would like to speak to you about. You've seen some of the displays, the pictures outside showing multiple religious groups. We want the beautiful artwork which is displayed down the hallway depict 28 different religions throughout the world. These paintings and descriptions are found in this book, A World of Faith. The original paintings hang on the walls of our center upstairs. Another version of the book, the first edition, was presented to the athletes at the Salt Lake 2002 Winter Olympic Games. The second version, this larger version, has been revised, and we want to share it with you. In collaboration with the artist, Kathleen Peterson, the one who painted all of them, Peggy Fletcher Stack, the author, we've produced the second edition, which includes 6 new religious groups. We're grateful to have the artist, Kathleen Peterson, with us today. If she's here, would she stand and be recognized? Kathleen? She's here a little bit later, okay. Anyway, we will be distributing copies of the new book to all of you delegates and members of the International Advisory Council at the conclusion of the symposium. I understand that the copies will be just outside these doors, outside this door, okay. And Kathleen will be available as well at that time to sign a copy of the book if you would so like. We are, I'm going to show you this additional version that we did after the Olympic Games, but the new one is available for you, and we would be most pleased to give that to you as a gift. Now, as we finish, we're going to have some additional speakers who can offer brief remarks and reflections about their experience in the symposium and offer lessons they wish to share with us. We will call them up one by one, but let me announce the order. First, we will have Judge Sharifat Solebo of the High Court of Lagos State, Nigeria. Then we will have the President of the Supreme Court of Slovakia, Jan Šikuta. Then we will have Senator Sergio Moro, the Senator of the Federative Republic of Brazil, who also served previously for more than 20 years as a judge. Next, we will have the Honorary President of the Asian Conference of Religions for Peace from the Republic of Korea, Sung-gon Kim. Next, we will have the Archbishop of Ayacucho of the Roman Catholic Church in Peru, Salvador Pinheiro Garcia Calderon. Finally, we would be pleased to hear from Angia Erma Rini, a Member of Parliament of Nahdlatul Ulama from Indonesia. Thank you. We will go in that order, and then I will stand to announce the concluding part of the program. So we begin with Judge Solebo, please.
Good evening, dear participants. This is my first time in Utah, though I've been to America for over 20 years. But I've never been to this part of USA. But I must tell you, I was overwhelmed about the Rocky Mountains, the ambience of the environment, and of course, the university. So that was the first thing that overwhelmed me when I came. And I want to seize this opportunity to thank the organizers. My second observation was the humility, hospitality, and generosity of the hosting community. The people of this state behave like we Africans. We respect ourselves. We are full of gratitude. It was unbelievable. Within 24 hours I came in, how many people kept saying, thank you for coming. I've never heard that anywhere except in Utah. So I thank you too. And that's the big lesson I am also taking away from this program. Then coming to us as participants, we are all from diverse countries, diverse culture, different religious beliefs. I've met the imams, the Jews, every religion. And I want to say, coming from where I'm coming from, Lagos, Nigeria, this is the first time I could see a cohabitation, a peaceful living, interrelation between every religious persons, as if we are one. And I want to believe we're actually one. We're all from Adam and Eve. So that's our ancestor, and that's one lesson I will go back to preach in Nigeria. I'm a child advocate, and of course, being a Muslim church, I also advocate a mosque about our rights and how we should tolerate ourselves, especially at this period of intolerance, extreme aggression in Nigeria about the other religions. So I thank you so much for this opportunity. And the Imam, the all religious leaders, I thank you for the good speeches. I have learned a lot about other religions and the practice. Thank you.
Good evening. I don't know what to say because I haven't prepared for this special occasion of this solemn meeting at the end of the symposium. Maybe I don't start with Your Excellencies, but I say, dear colleagues, dear friends. First of all, I like to thank the organizers for inviting me. That was for me really a very excellent, nice and enriching opportunity to be here at such a large symposium where participants of different professions and in different positions met from all parts of the world. For me, it was enriching also because that as the president of the Supreme Court in my country, I had now in those few days a lot of opportunities to speak with the presidents of the Supreme Courts and presidents of constitutional courts from other countries, not only European, but also from different parts of the world. And for me it was enriching that I listened very carefully how different systems are in different regions. Moreover, interesting for me was that it was not the aim of this conference to discuss whether one system is better or less better. Important was to exchange the information about how we do have and how we work in our systems. It is clear, and I see that in Europe, which is a small, relatively small region in comparison with Asia, Africa, America, that we do have in this small region, we do have a lot of different systems, but all those systems have the same, and that is valid for whole the world, that each system must have certain principles which must be met. For me personally, it was very interesting to hear all of you who spoke, and with your variety and richness of your temperament and approach. Of course, this reflected your culture, your openness and your dedication to this conference. Therefore, I'm very happy that I could be here. I'm happy that I could speak with many of you. I wish you good luck, and to organizers, good luck in organizing I hope, a conference, similar conference next year or in future. I will be very happy if I can contribute somehow, and thank you very much. Thank you.
the church to be in the conference, and then for the symposium, I thought, wow, I need to go, because when I think about the church, the ideas who came to my mind are integrity and respect. And I believe this also is the key that could help us to support the freedom of the religion and the intercourse of all these religions. What we must need is to respect what we have in common and what we have in difference between we all. I worked as a judge for 22 years before I became a politician in the Senate of Brazil. And my specific field was anti-corruption law and anti-laundering law. And we have there a phrase that you use in anti-money laundering policies, especially, is know your customer. I believe we are all aware about this phrase, and I think a necessary step is also to use this in other fields in a different way. It will know your neighbor. I believe is the first step that you could start to love your neighbor, and this is all about how we can deal with our common ground and our difference between all of these religions. I learned a lot with several of you, not only during the conference, but in the lunch, the dinner, the wonderful reception that we all have. I'm totally grateful. I also learned from my colleagues from Brazil. I heard stories that I didn't know yet. Let me quote Eric here with wonderful stories about the Yanomami people in Brazil. And I thought it was also very interesting to hear about the importance of the rule of law and the courts of justice. I believe they are necessary to enforce and to protect our liberties, but especially also freedom of the religion. So this was a correct mix in this symposium to hear not only about religion and the institutions that we need to support their function in our respective countries. So thank you very much. And I would like to say that if you need something in Brazil, if you don't feel aware in contact me. I'll be available to help the way I can. Thank you very much.
My name is Sang-gun Kim from South Korea. I belong to Won Buddhism, of Reformed Buddhism, which was taught in Korea 100 years ago. Frankly speaking, when I was invited by Brigham Young University Law, I was very reluctant to accept these invitations because many of my colleagues said, Mormon is very strange religion, you have to go. I was a professor of religions and got involved in international interfaith network, which is called Religion for Peace, for 30 years, and then became politician for 20 years. So one of my jobs is to make a bridge between religion and politics. But the topic is very interesting, and I know the Brigham Young universities. So I came for the first time to visit Utah and Salt Lake City, and I come with my wife and sister, the daughter. But most impressive thing is the human being living in Brigham Young universities. You are very kind with warm hospitalities. This morning my daughter asked me, I want to study at this college. So I welcome it, but in my mind, I'm concerned about how much tuition is. Anyway, secondly, the whole process is very satisfactory, well organized, the theme and program and subject and so on. So I really appreciate the organizer, Professor Brett Scharffs, I don't know the exact pronunciations, the director of the International Council of the Law of Religion and the Law and Religion, and Elizabeth Clark, she is the vice director who actually organized this organization, and above all, I really appreciate the professor called Durand, who found the BYU law. I really appreciate him. But one thing, practical things I want to consider from next time. I really have the taking a nap time after lunch. For me, daytime is a sleeping time in Korea. So afternoon, I always sleep here. Lastly, I suggest one thing to the BYU law. For the humankind, the most urgent issue today is how to confront the catastrophe caused by climate change. I think this is the most urgent issues. But I don't trust in politicians, even though I was politicians. Many political leaders agree to achieve 2050 carbon neutrality, but I'm very pessimistic because politicians, due to their interests, self-interest of their own countries, they cannot give priorities to these urgent issues. Their own national issues is more important for them. I think it is only religious communities to solve this urgent issue because only religious people have courage to give priority to these urgent climate change issues. So I suggest BYU Law to take this issue as the next subject of international symposium at these universities. Thank you very much. I appreciate all of you. Thank you.
No hablo inglés.
I don't speak English, so I'm going to speak in Spanish, which is the language that is most liked in the heavens.
En primer lugar,
First of all,
qué experiencia.
what an experience. What a beautiful experience, because everything in the world divides us. Geography, ideology, economies, but we have felt as brothers and sisters here because we walk towards the seeking of God so that we can establish the peace that this world needs. This is the first experience in this journey. We feel that we are seekers of God so that we may live in love, which is the most wonderful language, that of love and friendship. I do not know where you work or where you live or what your name is, but we have felt brothers and sisters here. I would also like to express joy. In the biblical language, in Leviticus chapter 25, it speaks of Jubilee. And the jubilation is a time of reflection, of thanking God, a time of celebration. And also, when we receive new blessings from heaven in order to continue our work. 75 years of the Declaration of Human Rights, 50 years of this law school. I am also celebrating, in May, I celebrated 50 years of being a priest, and in these days, I have felt them as a gift to my retirement. We have studied, we have heard, we have observed the differences, the difference in interventions, we have reflected, we have celebrated the friendship. How beautiful we find the conversations among friends, and now we leave with a mission to continue to take these good news, these news of peace and brotherhood to our own communities. I would like to remind you of the teachings of Paul, when he wrote a beautiful paradox. If you would like to be free, be a slave in love. This is the liberty. This is religious liberty, to be slaves of love. And that is why we must remember to extend the Samaritan hand. We must open our eyes. There is a great deal of hurt in this world. We must open our hearts in order to share the illusions and the tiredness. We must open our pockets, not to give money. We must give of ourselves, give of your time, give of your love, give of your mercy to all of your brothers and sisters that are involved and enveloped in pain and suffering, that we may know how to alleviate their pains with our care and with our hearts. May God bless this work. And I hope that you always have us in your list of friends. Thank you.
Oh, the light is... Assalamualaikum. Good evening, everybody. So I will speak in Bahasa. So please prepare your headset. kasih atas
Thank you to everyone for the opportunity to be able to they were able to share their individual experiences, and this has helped to enrich me.
membuat kita bisa bareng-bareng, kita bisa bersama-sama punya
And we can together have a commitment to be able to speak
kebebasan berpikir,
about the freedom to think and have your own conscience and have your own heart.
sangat berharap
And looking to forward years, I hope that
semua yang ada di sini
we don't only think about stuff that was happening here only here. I hope that we can actually take it home and go home and implement the things which we have discussed here.
terima kasih kepada
Thank you to everyone.
hospitality-nya udah
Thank you to the hospitality. That has been wonderful. Thank you to the student.
bantuan yang baik kepada kami semuanya.
The students have given great help to us.
Terutama saya percaya sama politisi karena saya adalah politisi.
And first of all, I care about politicians because I am a politician.
Tidak percaya sama politisi, menurut saya politisi penting sekali karena
But I want to say that politics is very important because it is, hopefully we can change the philosophies behind politics because I believe that politics is actually very important.
di dalam Islam itu
I also believe that climate change is important in the Islamic religion.
referensinya yang lebih tepat.
And I apologize, my friend definitely has a better reference than I do.
Amal yang tidak akan putus meskipun
But
kita semua
the
sudah meninggal. Jadi beberapa amal
I believe that there are many different things that we need to grow,
itu adalah amal jariah dan itu salah
and
adalah menanam
someday we're going to die, but we're going to plant trees today, so that even though that tree hasn't grown before we die, it will grow after we die. And that's how I think about climate change. I believe that it's important that we invest in our future and that we as religious leaders do actually talk about the taking care of the planet that we live on.
Terima kasih, mudah-mudahan
Thank you.
depan terus-menerus ada
I hope that looking forward,
konkret lagi, ada
we can begin to collaborate and have more concrete discussions in forums.
di dalam
But also, I hope that we're able to take these to our individual communities. I would like to say thank you, and I've had a wonderful time of meeting with all of you. This has been my very first time coming to Utah. Even though I've been to lots of different parts of America, I have thought that Provo has been wonderful,
performan dari para student luar biasa.
and it's been a great performance by the students.
Senang sekali bisa berfoto-foto dengan mereka semua.
And we're also so glad we got to take pictures with all the students.
Yang pulang bisa bertemu dengan keluarga.
And I hope that everyone who goes home can quickly and safely meet with their families.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
And thank you.
Thank you to each one who has expressed their thoughts. We appreciate your input and your reflections. Now, to conclude this session and to conclude our symposium, we will hear first from Brett G. Scharffs, the Rex E. Lee Professor of Law and Director of our center, the International Center for Law and Religion Studies. He will be followed by Professor Elizabeth A. Clark, Associate Director of the Center and the Chair of the Organizing Committee of this symposium. At the conclusion of her remarks, the symposium will finish and we'll move on to our activities and our dinner at the hotel. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Heartfelt thanks to everyone who has come from distance to be here, and thanks for those who have just spoken. Professor Kim, I'm happy to tell you that one of our delegates, who was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Pakistan about 15 years ago, sent 3 of his children to BYU, and they all graduated from BYU. He was happy to send them someplace where he thought they would be safe. And I'm very grateful to the comments of others focusing on the values of integrity and respect. And I agree, Bishop Salvador Pinero, that in a world where so much divides us, it is wonderful that we can come together and feel as brothers and sisters. And Angia, I hope you're right, that we will take home some of what we have learned and felt here, and that we'll be able to implement it into our lives. We're grateful for everyone who's made contributions to this important milestone in the history of the International Center for Law and Religion Studies. One of the things we have done here is we have spoken out against religious persecution and genocides. But one delegate reminded me that we have not mentioned the atrocities happening this week in Nagorno-Karabakh, disputed territory between Azerbaijan and ethnic Armenians. And in the last 20 days, we have seen an exodus of 100 or 120,000 people. And so as we gather in comfort and in good circumstances, we do want to remember that there are many who do suffer from persecution that is very real. We think of Jehovah's Witnesses in Russia, of the Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh, of the Uyghurs in China, Rohingya in Myanmar, Ahmadiyas in Iran and other places, the Yazidi that have been discussed, Baha'i in Iran and in other places in the Middle East. And it's not just tiny minorities that suffer discrimination. We are mindful that Christians may be the most persecuted group on earth, including in the Middle East, in Nigeria, in India, as we've heard. And there is still prejudice and discrimination against Muslims in many places in the world, including India and elsewhere. And of course, Jewish people and anti-Semitism seems to be on the rise in many places on earth. If we have failed to mention the particular group that you are concerned about, please consider it a sin of omission rather than a sin of commission. And we recognize that the needs are great in many places. In keeping with our focus on the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, I would like to conclude by offering a few remarks focusing on Eleanor Roosevelt, the chair of the Human Rights Commission that drafted the Universal Declaration. I do this in part because we in America don't do a good job of teaching our children about the important role of Eleanor Roosevelt, just as perhaps other countries may fall short in teaching the role of the founding figures of human dignity from their own countries. My presentation this afternoon is an abbreviation of a paper I contributed to a special issue of the Review of Faith and International Affairs that grew out of a conference that we helped organize at Oxford University in July. We were focusing on faith and the founding figures of human dignity, the key contributors to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. In focusing on Eleanor Roosevelt, I want to in no way diminish the other important contributors to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But I do want to talk about what human dignity meant specifically to Eleanor. There are two primary points worth emphasizing. First, hers was a deeply practical understanding based upon the real lives of real people. Second, this understanding was based not primarily on a philosophical or religious view of human nature, although to be sure these played a role, and Eleanor was deeply religious. But it was also based in fact on actual care for particular human beings, especially those who suffer discrimination or marginalization, including women, workers, refugees, and racial and religious minorities. Eleanor's love of humanity was not abstract and theoretical. It was built from the ground up, out of concern for actual human beings. As Mari Carmen Plata from the Organization of American States quoted in her speech yesterday, Eleanor Roosevelt, on the 10th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, excuse me, I went one slide too far. On the 75th anniversary of the Universal, or the 10th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Rights, said this: "Where, after all, do universal rights begin? In small places, close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on any map of the world." And as Mari Carmen added, no place is closer to home than our faith, suggesting that for many of us, our commitments to human rights will be rooted in our faith. Where did Eleanor Roosevelt get this practical and bottom-up understanding of human dignity and human rights? I'll just mention two contributing factors. The roots perhaps can be traced to her personal story. She was born in the fall of 1884 in New York City into a life of privilege. Her uncle was President Theodore Roosevelt, but Eleanor experienced hardship at an early age. While she adored her parents and found them loving at times, her relationship with them was complicated, as it was tragically brief. Eleanor's mother called Eleanor Granny due to her serious demeanor and apparent lack of beauty, which made Eleanor want to, as she put it, sink through the floor in shame. She felt she was always, quote, disgracing her mother, despite trying her very best to make her mother proud. Her father struggled with alcoholism and was often away from the family trying to receive treatment. Both parents, along with a younger brother, died before Eleanor was 10 years old. Another contributing factor, I believe, was Franklin Roosevelt's affair with his social secretary, Lucy Mercer, which Eleanor discovered by reading letters in 1918. While Eleanor never publicly wrote about the affair and rarely spoke of it, she wrote to a friend that, quote, "The bottom dropped out of my own particular world, and I faced myself, my surroundings, my world honestly for the first time." These painful lessons from the war and from her family stayed with her throughout her life. They shaped her thoughts on human dignity. Eleanor wrote in her autobiography about what she learned during this time of war, World War I, and her personal betrayal. She said, "I think I learned then that practically no one in the world is entirely bad or entirely good, and that motives are often more important than actions. I had spent most of my life in an atmosphere where everyone was sure of what was right and what was wrong. And as life has progressed, I have gradually come to believe that human beings who try to judge other human beings are undertaking a somewhat difficult job," in characteristic understatement. Eleanor believed she had become a more tolerant person and more confident in her abilities to accomplish her goals as a human rights activist. The crucible of the wars were very significant in Eleanor's development. She often reminded her readers of Franklin's words, "This war being fought for four great freedoms: freedom of religion, freedom from want, freedom from fear, and freedom of expression." Visiting London during the blackouts in 1942, she observed the bombed-out windows and destroyed rooms in the Queen's Palace and reflected later in a letter to her secretary, "You got a curious feeling over here that nothing but people count." In the decades after World War II, In a world characterized by the prospect of mutually assured destruction, Eleanor was emphatic about the importance of finding ways to live together. In 1960, she wrote, "We have to face the fact that either all of us are going to die together or we are going to learn to live together. And if we are to live together, we have to talk to one another." I found it meaningful that when she visited the Pacific during the war, she carried in her purse a prayer. "Dear Lord, lest I continue in my complacent ways, help me to remember that somewhere someone died for me today. And if there be war, help me to remember to ask, am I worth dying for?" Eleanor's husband Franklin died before the war ended, and for a movement to create a United Nations dedicated to a future of peace and human rights. She knew this was the dream he wanted to leave the world. She wrote, "When you have lived for a long time in close contact with the loss and grief which today pervades the world, any personal sorrow seems to be lost in the general sadness of humanity. For a long time, all hearts have been heavy for every serviceman sacrificed in the war. There is only one way in which those of us who live can repay the dead who have given their utmost for the cause of liberty and justice. They died in the hope that through their sacrifice an enduring peace would be built and a more just world would emerge for humanity. God grant that we may have the wisdom and courage to build a peaceful world with justice and opportunity for all people the world over. And now abideth these three, faith, hope, charity. But the greatest of these is charity." Her husband's dream to build an organization to prevent future wars now had become Eleanor's dream, and we will find ourselves failing to achieve the full measure of human rights and freedoms, the goal we desire to attain. To the countries that talk about human rights and constantly violate them, the rest of us have an obligation. We should set an example, but we should also keep pointing out the shortcomings which prevent the development of full freedom in these countries. Eleanor often talked about what we as individual small people might do. And as she talked about the small places where human rights would be realized, she was willing to risk even her life in this pursuit. In a story that I love, at the age of 74, she was asked to speak on civil rights at the Highlander Folk School in rural Tennessee. When the Ku Klux Klan learned about her plans, they placed a $25,000 bounty on her head. The FBI contacted her and warned her that they could not guarantee her safety. She told them, "I didn't ask for your protection. I have a commitment. I'm going." And in a scene I like to visualize, she put a gun on the dashboard of her car for protection and set off to drive to her speech. At age 74, even the threat of death did not dissuade her from her purpose. Just as I began this presentation with a brief elaboration of a text, Eleanor's 10th anniversary to the UDHR speech, I'd like to end with one as well. This one is more personal. It is Eleanor's nightly prayer. And for those of us who pray at night, you may feel like I do, that my prayers pale in comparison. This was Eleanor's prayer. Our Father, who has set a restlessness in our hearts and made us all seekers after that which we can never fully find, forbid us to be satisfied with what we make of life. Draw us from base content and set our eyes on far-off goals. Keep us at tasks too hard for us, that we may be driven to thee for strength. Deliver us from fretfulness and self-pitying. Make us sure of the good we cannot see and of the hidden good in the world. Open our eyes to simple beauty all around us, and our hearts to the loveliness men hide from us because we do not try to understand them. Save us from ourselves and show us a vision of a world made new. Eleanor indeed believed that loveliness hides in all hearts. As Katrina Lantos Sweat said, not just those of the hearts we love. Her invitation to future generations is contained in her nightly prayer, that those of us who have come after might set our eyes on far-off goals and be open to the beauty around us. At her death in 1962, the New York Times Magazine described her as, quote, more involved in the minds and hearts and aspirations of people than any other First Lady in history. We may not yet have achieved her vision of a world made new, but her commitment to human dignity for everyone, everywhere, and her commitment to religious freedom for all people in all places is a commitment we can continue to strive to achieve. Perhaps you have noticed the artwork on the wall outside this moot courtroom. There are 7 paintings by an artist named Jorge Coco, and they depict roles of our Savior, Jesus Christ, healer, mediator, counselor, peacemaker, advocate, lawgiver, and judge. This comes from a newly revised part of the BYU Law School mission statement. The second paragraph reads, BYU law recognizes the inherent dignity and equality of each individual and welcomes people from the full range of human experience. We are committed to the teachings of Jesus Christ and honor his many roles, including healer, mediator, counselor, peacemaker, advocate, lawgiver, and judge. In striving to emulate his example, we seek to be and develop people of integrity who combine faith and intellect in lifelong service to God and neighbor. You may have also seen this artwork. In his Sermon on the Mount, Jesus Christ declared with profound simplicity, "Blessed are the peacemakers." This artwork by the same artist, Jorge Coco, we have entitled Peacemakers Needed, in an invitation to everyone everywhere to strive to be peacemakers in our families and other personal relationships, in our schools and neighborhoods, in our workplaces, and beyond. On the far side of our differences of place, of nationality, of religion, and race, we are bound together as members of a single human family that shares this fragile blue orb we call Earth. In a time of deep political polarization, peacemakers are needed. The Argentine-American artist Jorge Coco describes his artistic style as sacro-cubism because he employs the abstract structures of cubism to illuminate sacred messages and themes. Through angles and shifting perspectives, Coco illustrates the deep connections between people and places, striving to come together in peace. The International Center for Law and Religion Studies commissioned this artwork from Jorge Coco to represent, in his distinctive sacro-cubist style, the common human dignity of all people in all places and the connections between the places and peoples of the earth. The artwork is entitled Peacemakers Needed, echoing an important address by President Russell M. Nelson, President of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, in the April 2023 General Conference of the Church, the conference just before the one we attended. In that speech, he said, "You have your agency to choose contention or reconciliation. I urge you to choose to be a peacemaker now and always." In making a direct plea to members of the church, President Nelson said, "As disciples of Christ, we are to be examples of how to interact with others, especially when we have differences of opinion. One of the easiest ways to identify a true follower of Jesus Christ is how compassionately that person treats other people." We have a copy of this artwork as a gift to each of you that you can pick up as you leave the moot courtroom today. We have copies for every delegate, for every student, for every area legal counsel, for every area communications director, for every member of our IAC, for every person who has helped with interpretation or has helped with the logistics of the conference in any way. It's rolled up in a tube for easy transport, and we hope it will be a parting gift from us to thank you for your contributions to this celebration of our 30th annual Law and Religion Symposium. And so I conclude with a final word of thanks to the delegates who have traveled great distances. Thank you especially for moving beyond representation. When you are the sole person from your country that comes to an international conference, there is almost always an overwhelming instinct to defend and represent one's home country. And yet what we have seen here, I believe, is an honest and fruitful conversation that has moved well beyond representation. And thanks to the alphabet soup of our helpers, the ALCs, ACDs, IAC, to the colleagues of the center, to our interpreters, formal and informal, and to our students. What gives me hope, a question we've asked others, is this gathering and our students who make it happen. I'd like to conclude by reflecting on the wise words of Bishop Alistair Redfern, who reminded us that human dignity is a gift from God, from our parents and family, from the communities in which we live. And we, likewise, are invited to reciprocate that gift in the way we treat others. Thank you, and God bless us, everyone.
Well, Brett, I'm not sure how to follow that. Not too long ago, I was speaking with a government official, and you'll be glad to know, not from any country represented here, although this actually sounds familiar to many, maybe. We were talking about religious regulations in their country, and I mentioned something about international norms and best practices, such as UDR, and his response was, "You're not one of those idealists, are you?" I recently heard reports of a very similar kinds of attitude in high levels of my own government, where constitutional interpretation on weighty matters was seen as no more than just politics. So why do I tell you this? In the opening session, Brett talked about the legacy of the UDHR. Where will it be in 75 more years? Will it matter? I see the future of the legacy of the UDHR, Universal Declaration, and our commitments to human rights as dependent on, more than anything, whether we continue to have individuals who refuse to give in to the cynicism of our age. So let me start with a story. 1990, I had the wonderful opportunity to live for several months in Slovakia. I can't see, just Shikuta. And I lived with a wonderful family. I taught English. I spent many months with them. I stayed over for Christmas. Wonderful Christmas I won't forget. One of the things I won't forget is they tried to teach me how to ski, which little children in Slovakia know how to do, but I'd never done. And so after 3 days of trying very hard and falling a lot, I finally learned, in their view, how to fall correctly. So, and I have to admit, I've lived in Utah over 25 years, and I still don't know how to ski. But I'm getting better at falling. So, with this Slovak family, New Year's Day, we all sat down in their apartment in front of the television for an annual ritual. In Czechoslovakia at that time, there was an annual address by the president of the country, followed by a rousing performance of Smetana's Má vlas, the great symphonic poem by the Czech Philharmonic. But this year, the address was different, because earlier that year, the country had gone through what they called the Velvet Revolution. Václav Havel had been elected president that summer, and this was one of his first major addresses to his country. There's this wonderful opening. I've never heard a better opening. He said, "My dear fellow citizens, for 40 years, you have heard from my predecessors on this day different variations on the same theme. How our country is flourishing, how many million tons of steel we produced, how happy we all were, how we trusted our government, and what bright perspectives were unfolding in front of us. I assume you did not propose me for this office so that I, too, would lie to you." As many of you know, approximately 20 years before that, Václav Havel had been arrested, put in prison, banned from his profession as a playwright when the Russian tanks came in and quashed the Prague Spring of 1968. In the 1970s, he led the Charter 77 protest movement, spent time in prison. But his time as a dissident led him to write his most powerful essay called The Power of the Powerless. And one of his main themes was contrasting what it means to live in truth and to live a lie, and how we all live lies in small ways, out of fear, conformity. He gave the example of the grocer who put up a patriotic statement in his window, not because he believed it, but because he felt obliged or worried of what his neighbors would think or what the government would think. But he explains living a lie leaves you susceptible of manipulation. And in contrast, living in truth, he said, is not just about politics or standing up for things in the political sphere, but can happen in any sphere, right? Poets, painters, musicians, or ordinary citizens who are able to maintain their human dignity. And that's what he focused on as this idea of living in truth. That is dignity, or what he called an attempt to regain control over one's own sense of responsibility, taking ownership for one's own life and choices. Living in truth as a life of integrity. As I've heard it said elsewhere before, truth is ultimately something we live, not just something we know. Okay, so what does this have to do with the UDHR? Nice stories, right? But the threats to its legacy come from a variety of sources, but as I mentioned earlier, to me, the greatest challenge in our world today is cynicism. Cynics will devalue the idealistic norms, such as human rights or universal rights. Politics, they may say, it's just a power play. Who has more power? Truth, equity, justice are lovely words, but are just used to hide personal interests or power or leverage over others. International norms and rights are just window dressing for powerful states imposing their views. Now, I'm not here to gloss over or ignore the reality that law and norms can be used for purely instrumental reasons to exercise power, colonialism, unfairness, injustice, and these lead to tragedy. This is very real. But there is a value of laws that transcends mere power and politics. And I love the example of, I'll return to the idea of Václav Havel in this Charter 77 movement. It's a perfect example. The movement focused on holding its own government accountable for failing to meet human rights obligations in the international documents they had signed, which were based on the UDHR. That's all they focused on. Specific example, here's the norms, here's the laws, you've agreed to it, this isn't happening. Demanding that the laws be upheld, said Havel, is an act of living within the truth that threatens structures built of lies at their weakest point. Now, modern scholars have documented this issue too, that as you raise specific commitments and problems in countries, including our own, even if the partners on the other side of the dialogue are hypocritical, arguments and discussions that start rhetorically increasingly become true dialogues over specific human rights allegations and forces the hypocritical partner to address issues. Now, I'm not making a suggestion that human rights or the UDHR should replace religion and things of transcendent importance. I love the statement of Václav Havel again. The key to a humane, dignified, rich, and happy life, he said, does not lie either in the Constitution or in the criminal code. Right? But there is still power in having these touchstones of our commitments to rights, something we can all refer to. Now, at times, we live lies, or tell ourselves lies, or tell others lies. But when we see individuals who live in truth, who live with integrity, I know it makes me ashamed and inspired to do better. And this kind of honest accountability can come to apply to our commitments and the rights we say we should protect, the neighbors we say we love. And then we start to see the power that human rights norms, such as the UDHR, can have. So was Charter 77 successful? Well, not if you looked at it at the time, or in 5 years, or in 10 years, right? The signers lost their jobs, their children lost their educational opportunities, some lost citizenship, and served time in prison. But this commitment to human rights, to living in truth, to holding to ideals, set up the stage for the eventual peaceful transfer of power and election of Václav Havel as president in 1990. Martin Luther King has famously said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." Right? Change may be slow, but the impact of moral actions, living in a moral universe, means the world moves, converges towards justice. The comment Ms. Finney had about planting trees. We may not be able to affect much in our lives, but planting a tree will affect the generation after us. So I know we live in a world of injustice. There's persecution, war, abuse, unvarnished evil. Solzhenitsyn said the line between good and evil does not run through political parties or countries, but runs through every human heart. So ultimately, it's up to us. We all choose in our lives every day whether we live in truth or live a lie. When an individual chooses to live more and more in integrity and truth, that individual has a powerful influence in their family, in their community, and then on to their country. When enough individuals have integrity to respect their commitments, including legal commitments, then the country can flourish and become a powerful influence for good in the world. And if enough countries ran their affairs with integrity, then commitments, human rights would be honored, making our world more peaceful and stable. But the choice is ours. Will we give in to the cynicism of our age, or will we choose to live in the truth? I want to thank you for being here. And more than that, thank you for your lives lived in your own communities, the examples and beacons that you are of life and truth, of integrity, of service, of goodness. My wish is that we may all live here with more knowledge, with expanded friendships, relationships, and above all, with a commitment to live in truth. Thank you.